Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mount Joy Area Historical Society meeting. I am Linda Everly. I am the archivist for the Historical Society, and I guess I'm also the vice president. Our president couldn't be here tonight. She had another engagement that she wasn't able to get to. So I would like to hear how many of you have heard about the meeting through the newspaper, like the Merchandiser or something like that. Okay. What about online? Did you get an online? Okay. What about Lancaster newspapers? Anyone from Lancaster newspapers? I saw it. Okay. All right. Excellent. Super. We like to know how our advertising is working, so it's good to know how anyone has heard about the meetings. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would stand. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One of our longtime members, Jay Grider, passed away. He was a board member for many years, and he was also the person who was in charge of the campaign when we did this building, when we renovated this building. And he passed away. His funeral is on Friday, and I would like to take a moment of silence to remember Jay and his family. Thank you. So we are doing a end of the year. We will have a drawing for the people who have come to the most meetings. We have a prize basket that we're going to give, but the only way you get entered in that is if you sign in. So if you have not signed in, please remember to do that after the meeting. You can sign in. We're keeping track of everyone, so whoever has most meetings that they have attended will receive that prize basket. We've got some, I'm not sure what exactly is in it. There's prizes, local prizes. Okay, so we have local prizes. I know we have a gift card for someplace, a food gift card, I believe, and a coffee gift card, and some Chotsky stuff from the Historical Society. So, I don't know, it's going to be fun. See who gets that. I want to call your attention to our May meeting. May 19th is John Paul Benowitz, and he's going to be talking about Anabaptist presidents. So please come back May 19th to hear that. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Jean Ellis to come up, and she is going to introduce our speakers this evening. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming, especially the ladies, the Patriot ladies of Lancaster. And they're going to tell us their story tonight. As you can tell, they were active during the Civil War, and there were the people at home, as the men went off, formed ladies' aid societies to support the people from their community that were fighting the war. And 10 days after the firing on Fort Sumter, the Lancaster ladies met to organize Patriot Daughters of Lancaster. Initial purpose being to raise funds and provide food and supplies for soldiers in the local company's Pennsylvania regiments. They coordinated the efforts of women's societies in the smaller towns in the county, which may have been Mount Joy, and they knitted socks, they sewed needed articles of clothing, and collected supplies from hospitals. Lancaster men accompanied wagons and train cars loaded with provisions for the major battles. So, I will turn this over to Jeannie, and she will tell you all about the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster, Patriot Ladies of Lancaster.
Thank you. Two Jeans in the same room.
Yeah.
All right. So Gina already already said some of the things which I was going to. You see the commemoration of the firing on Fort Sumter, which happened on April 12th. It was a time when the country was very divided, as it is today. It was also the date when, well, the Confederate troops attacked Fort Sumter, and that marked the beginning of the American Civil War. In our school social studies classes and history classes, we learned about battles of the Civil War, but most of us didn't learn a lot about how the war affected the civilians at home. Today we're going to tell you some stories about one of the first ladies' aid societies to form after that firing on Fort Sumter, our own Patriot Daughters of Lancaster, formed on April 22nd, 1861. This group was supported by the entire Lancaster County community, men, women, and children. We're very fortunate to have documentation about the activities conducted by this group. Some of the documentation comes from newspapers of the time, census information, and a book written shortly after the Battle of Gettysburg by one of the members of the original group. My name is Jeannie Herr Cassidy, and with me today are some of the members of our Living History group who will help to tell our story and then present a short fashion show after the PowerPoint. So with me I have Sharon Metzger, Colleen Delcamp, Amy Klapanis, and my esteemed husband, the officer, Michael Cassidy. We have another member in the back who's, where is he? He's back there. He's just not in his car today, Fred Priester. Okay. Rosina Weaver Hubley was the founding president at the age of 68 years. After her husband's death in 1830, Rosina became a prominent businesswoman in Lancaster, running the Swan Hotel from 1832 until 1855. She was also president of the Union Dorcas Society, which provided support for soldiers' families. And listed here are the names of some of the other members of the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster. And you'll recognize some of those Lancaster County names like Kendigan, Slaymaker, Reigert, common names that we still find in Lancaster County.
The artist named this piece The Influence of Woman. In one corner, a sister of charity watches over the dying soldier, or not.
There's a ghost in the room.
Perhaps.
I'm gonna sit her.
Okay. In one corner, a sister of charity watches over the dying soldier. In another, a lady nurse writes a letter dictated from the wounded man to alleviate the worries of his dear ones far away. Ladies at home sew more comfortable clothing for the troops, and another lady, Honest Biddy, serves as a laundress. In Lancaster, the Patriot Daughters had meetings on Saturday evenings at the White Swan Hotel and at St. James School on Duke Street. They formed various committees. The Ward Committee was made up of ladies going door to door in their respective Lancaster wards to collect donations. Other committees included a volunteer corps of nurses who opened and managed an infirmary for sick soldiers at Franklin and Marshall College. When requests came in for socks for one regiment, or shirts for another, or maybe books for another, the ladies placed ads in the newspapers requesting these items. Ladies' aid societies from the small towns and villages throughout Lancaster County responded by organizing donations and sending them to the Patriot Daughters. All items were stored in a large warehouse at Fulton Hall, now the Fulton Theater. To give Lancastrians incentives to donate items, the Daily Evening Express printed the names of donors with a list of items they contributed. Who doesn't like to see their name in the newspaper? Neighbors would outdo neighbors. That was genius in obtaining much needed items, especially food.
As you can see, there were many ladies' aid societies active in supporting the war effort. This is just a partial list. And we know that churches are also formed some similar groups. The young lady shown in the photograph,
Can I just
Yes.
interrupt one time? You see the first one listed?
Yes.
Women of Mountjoy.
Here you are.
The young lady shown in the photograph lived in the southern Lancaster County Quaker community of Liberty Square in Drewmore Township. Her name was Rachel S. Smith, and she was the daughter of a Quaker farmer who aided runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Rachel organized a collection from about 40 of her neighbors in the Liberty Square area. These donations were sent to the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster. The July 14, 1863 Daily Evening Express listed the items that were donated: dried apples and other fruits, rolls of linen and muslin, shirts, stockings, and a sheet, and jelly.
Lancaster men, acting as agents for the Patriot Daughters, drove wagons loaded with provisions to the sites of major battles. The Patriot Daughters provided Lancaster soldiers with supplies as they left for the war and welcomed them with elaborate dinners when they were mustered out. Soldiers from Lancaster City were supplied with blankets and haversacks full of rations, and one whole regiment received flannel shirts. The earliest relief efforts were directed to the Ohio volunteers camped near Lancaster. When their train arrived, the ladies fed them and provided them with badly needed overcoats and blankets. When the 14th and 15th Pennsylvania volunteers arrived, the ladies provided them with shirts, bedding, and luxuries the men hadn't seen in a long time. They provided dinner for 2,000 men. The ladies had enough leftover food to feed the soldiers for 3 more days. This was probably the first home-cooked meal these men had since joining the Army. Prayer books and haverlocks for keeping the sun off the men's necks were distributed. The Patriot Daughters also gathered needed supplies for hospitals. Children pulled lint to be used for stuffing into wounds, and the ladies met to make bandages. They gathered wines for fever cases and jellies for the sick, along with sweet herbs for flavoring, canned tomatoes, pickles, and pure cider vinegar. These are just some examples of items sent, and the list goes on and on. One hospitalized soldier wrote home to his mother that he felt 200% better because of the food that was provided by the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster.
U.S. flags were customarily presented to local companies by their towns or the ladies' aid societies. Flags were issued to regiments, like regimental colors and a U.S. flag, but companies did not have one issued, and they were not allowed to carry them on battlefield, but they liked them in camp to mark their camp headquarters for the company. So the ladies made those flags or bought them and presented them to the Lancaster companies. Records show that the Patriot Daughters presented unofficial U.S. flags to be flown to camp after they trained at Camp Wayne in Chester County. And some flags were shipped to companies in the field. Next, I'd like to talk to the family. Sadly, General John Reynolds from Lancaster was killed at Gettysburg. His brother, Commander William Reynolds, later promoted to Admiral, wrote of the donations the Patriot Daughters sent to his ship, the USS New Hampshire, currently at Port Royal, and he became a commandant of Port Royal Naval Station. His letter read, "My dear Madam, it is with much gratification that I acknowledge the receipt of your contribution for the 6 seamen of this squadron. These poor fellows suffer as much from confinement as from other ills. They need little delicacies for their diet, and I'm sure the eggs, apple butter, and domestic wines are luxuries to which their palates are unaccustomed, and which will be most agreeable to their tastes. With kindest remembrances to yourself and your household, and to the Patriot Daughters generally, I am sincerely yours, William Reynolds. I do the sauerkraut story about the ladies request the ladies received for sauerkraut for Christmas for one of the German regiments from Pennsylvania. The Daily Evening News reported on December 18th, 1861, early in the war, that a number of the volunteers in Colonel Henry Ambright's regiment, the 79th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry, have written to their friends that there was nothing that would be more acceptable to them for their Christmas dinner than a good mess of sauerkraut to boil and eat with their pork rations. The article continued to say that a number of wives, mothers, and sisters sent their contributions of cabbage, and a barrel of fine kraut was prepared, nicely packed and hooped and headed. Now a barrel, you know what a barrel is? It's about 53 gallons. After a battle with the Adams Express Company, which one of the big war profiteers of the day, a major freight transportation company of the Civil War area, which rarely missed opportunities for profiteering and price gouging. The sauerkraut was prepared by the ladies and finally arrived at camp on December 27, 1861, and the Express reported that its arrival caused quite a sensation in camp. Furthermore, among the many good things sent from home, none were more generally welcome among the Lancaster boys than the sauerkraut. After this experience, the Patriot Daughters, which are really an exceptionally well-managed business operation of their own, strove to hire their own wagons and own teamsters rather than rely on established freight companies.
From the published letters of Dr. John F. Huber, who was a member of Trinity Lutheran Church in Lancaster and an Army surgeon from 1861 to 1866, we learned that he encouraged women to publicly proclaim their patriotism as a way of supporting the war. On Christmas Day of 1862, he wrote a letter of thanks to a woman who had written a note of encouragement and tucked it into the toe of a stocking that she had donated. Her P.S., those of us who are older know what P.S. was, if in health, keep the toes of these stockings toward the rebels. Dr. Huber shared that the soldier wearing the socks stood up gallantly in the defense of his flag and the maintenance of our nationality at Fredericksburg on the 13th this month. He was not wounded.
After the Battle of Antietam on September 30th, 1862, 4 men left Lancaster with 6 wagon loads of hospital stores. When I say wagon load, think of those great big wagons you might see, like Conestoga wagons, something close, maybe not quite that big, but darn close. I mean, we're not talking about, little wags with a mule. We're talking about big wagon loads. Wagon loads of hospital stores raised by the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster from folks all over that county. Pastor Conrad, who allegedly wrote the report, which I'm paraphrasing, to Messrs, the editor of the Daily Express. We left our freight at the depot on Tuesday, September 30th at Harrisburg. We got all of the porters and stragglers we could to help transfer our cargo in good time into the Cumberland Valley Railroad baggage car. All of it got unloaded but not transferred. 7 barrels and 2 boxes were left in the care of a porter with orders to forward it on to the next train. We got to Hagerstown after nightfall and unable to have it stored until morning. The question arose, how shall we get supplies to their proper destination? Wagons could not be had for love or money. Undertakers wanted $15 to $25 for us to use 1-horse spring wagon to bring a corpse from the battlefield 10 miles distant. Being acquainted with the area and our own ingenuity having kicked in, we avoided the extortionists. We sent a messenger to the county who persuaded one of our old parishioners to send us a 4-horse team. By Wednesday at 8 a.m., we had unloaded the car and were loading our wagon, over which a guard was stationed. I like the fact that they trusted a porter to guard some of the stuff overnight originally. Porters were generally African Americans. Others probably could not be trusted, but they would have, they might have had different sympathies, might have taken the contents, but they trusted it to an African American porter. We found Mr. Harris. Oh, got a little more, right? We found Mr. Harris, an Army officer's wife, an avid devotee to the Union cause. Mrs. Harris recently secured a room in Sharpsburg for supplies, so we left ours with her and promised to meet her in the afternoon.
This book was written in August of 1863 by Martha Ayler, one of the Patriot daughters who traveled to Gettysburg to provide support there. It was published in January of 1864 and sold as a fundraiser. After working as a nurse in Gettysburg, Mrs. Ayler continued to serve as a nurse after the war.
But let us return to the summer of 1861 by sharing some readings from Martha Ayler's book. The Columbia-Wrightsville Bridge had been destroyed by fire on June 28 to prevent Confederate troops from coming into Lancaster County. She said the bridge at Columbia was set fire early in the evening, and though 10 miles distant, we saw it distinctly. No lovelier evening can be imagined. The moon was shining in the clear and cloudless sky, and the lurid flashes from the burning bridge gave everything an almost supernatural appearance. During the still hours of that summer night, we watched and waited, not knowing what the morrow would bring forth. A few days later brought the intelligence that a battle was in progress in Gettysburg, and that Reynolds, Lancaster-owned brave Reynolds, had fallen. Many boxes were packed, and the gentlemen who volunteered to take our supplies to the battlefield were furnished with whatever was required to assist them in their sad duties. We were amply repaid for all our labors by knowing that our supplies were the first that arrived on the battlefield, arriving at a time when thousands were suffering and dying. At last there was a thoughtful pause, when one of us suggested that we ought to go to Gettysburg ourselves, for if ever our services as a society were needed, it was now. At first all the difficulties of the undertaking were presented. We had almost given up in despair when Mr. Slagle, a nephew of our kind and most excellent president, Mrs. Hubley, came in and said he had brought 11 horses and his wagon and carriage to Lancaster County when the rebels were expected, and if we thought of going to Gettysburg, he would gladly take us and our stores to Adams County tomorrow, if we could be ready.
Good morning. The ladies left Lancaster. It was raining in torrents. They were a sad-looking party and looked even gloomier than they felt. Of course, when they arrived in Columbia, there was no bridge. It's having been burned several days before the battle. So they had to be ferried across the Susquehanna River, by boat. The captain reassured the ladies that nurses and hospital stores were to be ferried first. However, when the boat returned, people jumped aboard and would not get off. The ladies watched the boat leave, and the captain informed those still waiting that that was the last boat of the day. Because of the rain, the river was too high. The ladies had no alternative but to stay over and presented themselves at the hotel in rather a miserable appearance. The ladies were wet, muddied, cold, and humiliated when they arrived. The next morning, they were at the dock at 5 a.m. and were able to get on the first boat. They didn't get to Wrightsville until 10 a.m., where they saw a large house destroyed and many other houses perforated by shot and shell. The ladies drove on to York on the bumpy dirt road. They stayed overnight in York at the invitation of a kind stranger, were fed, and had a good night's sleep. As the ladies got closer to Gettysburg, they began to see ambulances and could hear the shrieks of the wounded and the groans of the dying. They fed as many retreating soldiers as they could. Everything was in ruin, and they weren't even in Gettysburg yet. They finally arrived in the town itself around 10 a.m. on July 7th. Horses were laying dead everywhere, as well as mangled bodies of men who had not yet been buried. The smell had to be more than the ladies could bear, and what these women saw before they even made their way to the Christ Church would never be forgotten.
This talks about their diet. We had until now no systematic plan of action. All of us agreed that it would be better if we would take charge of one hospital. The only rooms that we could obtain were directly opposite Christ Church, the college church, which had been occupied since the first day's battle by the 1st Corps, 2nd Division, General Reynolds' men, designated by the white lozenge on a red flag. We had learned that they stayed in an apartment behind what is now the Gettysburger restaurant in Gettysburg. We had by tacit agreement arranged that some of us should cook and prepare delicacies for the sick, while the rest should undertake the nursing. I was one of those upon whom the latter duty devolved. With what trepidations I crossed the street for the first time to enter the scene of so much sorrow and anguish may be more easily imaged than described. Had I stopped one moment to think, my courage would have failed. I would have turned back, but I did not. Some were on a little straw, while most of them had nothing between them and the hard boards of the pews and the floor, and more fortunate ones had their knapsacks under their heads. I went back to the rooms, and we all commenced sorting the pillow, shirts, sheets, etc., sending at the same time to the commissary for bed sacks, which the men attendants filled with straw. When our patients were washed and dressed and placed in their new beds with a fresh white pillow under their heads and a sheet thrown over them, they looked their gratitude, which was more eloquent than words. One of us handed them each a handkerchief wet with cologne. Perhaps it will interest some to know of what our bill of fare consisted. In the morning, we fed them tea and toast with soft-boiled eggs. Dinner consisted of either chicken or mutton soup. The chicken and mutton were given to the convalescent and the soup to those who were very sick. Always 2 vegetables and sometimes a simple pudding for pudding. For supper, they had tea and stewed fruit and buns. It was very simple, but when you think that it was always nicely prepared and enough provided for 150 men, that our cooking apparatus were very imperfect and inconvenient, you may form some idea of the amount of labor performed over a blazing wood fire stove in the middle of July.
Before leaving home, I had been informed by one who ought to know better that our army was made up of foreign adventurers, German and Irish, soldiers of fortune, paid hirelings, whilst the Southern Army was found with all the chivalry and magnanimity of the nation. Never were expressions more foul or malignant, or slanders more base or cruel. We are grateful that the qualifications which constitute good soldiers and noble men are not confined to one nation. And though it is difficult to discriminate where all were so brave, yet the bravest was a young Englishman, the color bearer of a New York regiment. He came to this country an orphan boy, was educated in our free schools, found friends who assisted him, and had become prosperous in business. And he felt that for a country which had afforded him home and happiness, it was an honor and a privilege to suffer and die. This is a paraphrase of the Englishman's story. He asked Martha to write a letter to his sweetheart, telling how he had fallen, bleeding, and wounded, and at his request added that though he lost a leg, he was proud to tell her that he had saved the regimental colors, and his own life too was still spared him, which only was made valuable by thoughts of her. He waited for a response for weeks, but when he received it, it said that she no longer wanted to marry him. He took a turn for the worst, and his dying words were, "Tell her I forgive her."
The Patriot daughters stayed at Christ Lutheran Church for at least 4 weeks, according to Martha's information written in hospital scenes. They had been back home for 5 days when they received a letter requesting that they return because the patients missed their cooking. 3 of the ladies returned. They arrived in time to assist with the transfer of the remaining 78 patients to the seminary hospital, which contained mostly Confederate inmates. About the Confederate inmates, Mrs. Ayler writes, "They are a poor, degraded, deluded set of men, much inferior in education and cleanliness to the Union soldiers, but may it be said to their credit, are devout Christians, read their Bibles constantly, and never slept at night without singing a hymn and one of their number offering up a prayer." About the rebel sympathizers, she said, "When supplies arrived from rebel sympathizers, they furnished those who were slightly wounded among them with citizens' clothes, and by that means many escaped. Rebel sympathizers opened rooms similar to those of the Christian Commission, receiving cartloads of goods every day, and gloried in saying that not a Union soldier should have even an orange. The Provost Marshal discovered their doings and confiscated their goods, distributing among the sanitary and Christian commissions, placing guards around the rebel tents, and their inmates were left entirely to the care of the Union nurses. Of course, they were well and conscientiously taken care of, receiving not only good plain food, but when refreshing drinks were given to the patients or fruit and delicacies supplied, they too received their share."
The Confederate General Isaac R. Trimble was a division commander in the assault known as Pickett's Charge at the Battle of Gettysburg. He was wounded severely in the leg and was left on the field. The lower third of his leg was amputated at a farmhouse in the rear. Surgeons warned of infection if he were moved in an ambulance, so Trimble chose to be taken prisoner. He was a patient at the seminary hospital and was mentioned in Martha Ayler's description, and not very kindly. For men like General Trimble, I have no sympathy. Theirs was the infamy of inaugurating this wicked rebellion, and they should be sufferers. Had any of our poor officers in their southern dungeons dared to show half the audacity of this man, he would have been immediately shot. While General Trimble would order the best of everything cooked, if it did not please him, he sent it back to the kitchen. I was there one day when his dinner was returned. It consisted of nice fried ham and eggs with mashed potatoes and onions, but it did not please him. Norris, who was the cook, asked me what he should do. I suggested letting him wait until his appetite improved, which was done. No other dinner was supplied.
As the slide indicates, the Patriot daughters raised $12,000 approximately $240,000 in today's money, at their 1864 week-long fair, which was held from February 22nd through February 27th at Fulton Hall. It was called the first Grand Donation Fair. For the fair, donations were solicited from the townships, boroughs, and villages of Lancaster County. Ladies' handwork, books, and maps were needed. There were displays of paintings, statuary, and battle relics, and also musical entertainment. The ladies not only raised money by holding bazaars and sanitary fairs, but they also arranged for musical groups to perform concerts. They held tableaux, which were entertainment of the day. Models or ordinary people would stay motionless to portray a painting or an event that happened in history. All money charged went to the cause. Children even participated by going door to door, collecting donations, and having fairs at their schools to raise money. The Patriot Daughters collaborated with the U.S. Sanitary Commission and the U.S. Christian Commission. It must be noted here that these organizations were not funded by the government, and yet the U.S. Sanitary Commission was able to raise about $25 million in donations and supplies, which, as the slide says, is nearly $481,224. The ladies collected money for widows and orphans and provided for children whose fathers had gone off to war. After the Patriot Daughters disbanded in 1865, they continued to help widows and orphans, and they also helped to educate free blacks. They kept busy making dressing gowns and slippers for injured and sick soldiers in the hospitals.
The country was devastated to learn that their beloved President Lincoln had been shot on Good Friday, April 14th, at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He died the following day on April 15th. The Lincoln funeral train passed through Lancaster, Pennsylvania on April 22nd, stopping at 1 o'clock. It was greeted by an estimated crowd of 30,000 to 40,000 mourners. The Examiner and Herald and the Lancaster Daily Express reported the following account. As the train slowly neared the depot, all eyes were bent upon it, and all tongues were silent. The train halted in the depot just on the same spot where a little over 4 years ago the living president, while on his way to Washington, returned the salutations of a jubilant people who cheered him on his way to the Capitol. The train halted, but for 4 or 5 minutes, just long enough to permit an immense crowd to obtain a fair look at the mourning-clad cars. A gentleman from the funeral party approached the platform, makes a request that the people remain in their places so they can have a good opportunity of seeing the funeral car. A committee of the Patriot Daughters, however, by permission, entered the car containing the remains and laid upon the coffin a magnificent bouquet composed of camellias and white roses. The scene in the car was an affecting one. A few who witnessed it turned away with dry eyes. The committee of ladies consisted of Miss Rosina Hubbard, the president, and 6 other women. In the car which the remains rested was painted a deep black, and it was elaborately draped in mourning. As it slowly passed to the depot, every eye was bent upon it, every head bowed down in grief, and indeed a sad and mournful moment to every loyal heart, and the scene, though passing in grief, will not be forgotten while life lasts. This depicts recreated cars which are now in Elizabethtown, and the ladies have participated in that reenactment. I do want to mention that there were some other writings about The ladies got to go on the Lincoln fuel car to place their wreath. Dignitaries from Lancaster, elected officials and things like that, were a little miffed. They were not permitted on the car. But they were, and rightfully so.
The idea for a memorial to Lancaster and Union soldiers killed during the American Civil War was conceived soon after the end of hostilities in 1865. Rosina Hubley and the Patriot Daughters championed the construction of the monument. The ladies held a fundraising sale in December of 1867 at the nearby Fulton Hall, now called the Fulton Theater, to help finance the construction. The event raised $3,500 with the goal being $20,000. The county commissioners were involved in raising the remaining needed funds. It was commissioned on November 4th, 1872 at the cost of $26,000 and was unveiled and dedicated on July 4th, 1874. The large crowd watching the dedication included Civil War veterans and a group of girls from the Mount Joy Soldiers Orphan Home, who sang the solemn song, "My Father's Grave." Rosina Hubley, who had led the efforts to construct the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, died on February 5th, 1875, about 6 months after the dedication.
The Soldiers and Sailors Monument is a 43-foot Gothic revival memorial which stands in Penn Square in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The monument was designed and carved by Lewis Colby, a Lancaster Civil War veteran and local stonecutter. The statue on the top is of a robed woman known as the Genius of Liberty. She holds a sword and a shield. She faces north, which, according to legend, allows her to turn her back on the former Confederate States of America, defeated in the war. The 4 figures at the base of the monument are the artillery on the northeast corner, the Navy on the southeast corner, cavalry on the southwest corner, and the infantry on the northwest corner. On Veterans Day 1999, a plaque was added that specifically honors African Americans who have served. The base of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument is carved with the inscription, "Erected by the people of Lancaster County to the memory of their fellow citizens who fell in defense of the Union in the War of the Rebellion, 1861 to 1865.
The Living History Group, known as the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster, has been in existence since approximately 1992 and 1993. We have participated in Civil War reenactments at Gettysburg, Cedar Creek, Virginia, and Chamonix Creek, among others. We have also participated in living history activities at Landis Valley, Ridley Creek Park, Wheatland, and Lancaster, the Robert Fulton Birthplace, and in Gettysburg at the Daniel Lady Farm, the George Spangler Farm, the Children of 1863 Museum, and the Seminary Ridge Museum. We usually take part in Remembrance Day events at Gettysburg in November, commemorating Lincoln's delivery of the Gettysburg Address at the National Cemetery. We invite you to ask questions and the cards will be picked up.
I forgot to get them out, but I'll get them out right now. We have some
Questions right now.
cards. A question we're often asked is, did we make our own clothes? Some of us do and some of us don't. Another question we're often asked is, how did you get into the hobby? And some of us have ancestors who fought in the Civil War. Some of us just think it's a great way to learn history, is through telling the stories. So, questions, or should we go right on to the fashion show? Yes.
I don't have a question, but I was on a trip with Fun Time Tours
Oh,
from Lancaster,
okay.
and we were at a place where we saw the train that took Lincoln. And we also saw the intricate little cards. All this train was carved with a knife.
Yeah.
And anyway, we got to see the key that was carved and put on Lincoln's car. So
Very interesting. I bet you enjoyed that.
that was very good trip.
Yes. And I wonder if that was to Elizabethtown where their recreated stone, or train is in
Where is that train?
Stone Gables, in Elizabethtown.
The actual cars?
Yes. Not a lot of cars. There's the engine, of course, and there's the funeral car. I would say one or two passenger cars in between. Sometimes they give rides, they'll have special events where they'll give rides. When they first obtained it, it was on the anniversary of when Lincoln, when the train passed through that area. And we were there that year when they did that. So they don't do it every year anymore, but that's where the train is. Why don't we go ahead with our little fashion show, and then if you have other questions, we'll be happy to address them.
Madam President, can I say one word about this group in the Civil War, and I told you how innovative they were as business leaders and really putting together this group, which is far more advanced than a lot of little Civil War ladies' aid societies and groups that were around. But on their nursing contributions, they call went out to nurses for Gettysburg. And a lot of churches sent a few people, and they would go for a week and run away, or maybe 2 weeks total. These ladies went there from, the Patriot Daughters were there from a couple days after the battle until, what we say, about 5 weeks. They got home, and a letter followed them so quickly, it might have been sent before they, returned. So a week or so later, they're returning and help empty out that field hospital at Christ Church and moving people up to the Lutheran Seminary, which was still operating as a Union General Hospital, along with the Camp Letterman. So there were two official ones that were left about a month after the battle. And they stayed there until a week or two into September, when they closed that hospital and sent the few remaining soldiers that were still injured to Camp Letterman. So those ladies nursed for the entire summer. They were no nurses, no people just showing up to see the sights and then leaving. They nursed for the entire summer. And that was quite unusual, except for the nurses that were already attached or would be attached to the Army.
The last patient that was released from the seminary hospital was Lieutenant Colonel McFarland. And that was when they closed it down, because they were ready to open it back up for the students coming in for their fall semester.
But when we go to Lutheran Hospital, we're like rock stars. I mean, they were so important to the Lutheran Seminary.
So we get asked a lot, what do you have on under there? So we're going to show you. Now, none of us are brave enough to stand here in our underpinnings. So we are going to show you our underpinnings. So when we get dressed, the first thing we're going to start with are our drawers. Now this is a rather new item of clothing. Before this, women went commando, yeah. But now they're wearing drawers, but the thing about these drawers is they are called split drawers. So another question we often get is, how do you go to the bathroom? First off, you find the handicap bathroom, so you can fit in there. But second off, with the split drawers, it makes it much easier to go to the bathroom. The next item we're going to put on is our chemise. And that's kind of like your slip, your covering. It goes over, your regular, or over your drawers. After that, well, we're going to put on probably one of the most controversial, most questioned about article of clothing, the corset. Now, we all have seen, I'm sure, Gone with the Wind, right? And we've seen Scarlett hanging onto the bedpost while they're yanking those strings. Well, Gone with the Wind is a lovely movie. And I'll tell you, don't believe the clothing in it, don't believe what's happening in it, don't believe the whole curtain thing, Neverland did the curtain thing much better. Much better. But girls started wearing a corset. Once they started to develop, they started wearing a corset. You wear a corset every day. Did they wear them as tight as what you're seeing Scarlett O'Hara? No, because who wants to wear it like that every day? So the corsets were made for them, and we're all wearing, most of us are wearing corsets, because that's the fashion of the day. So you wore a corset all your life, and your body was just used to wearing a corset. Your stomach muscles were not as strong because your corset kept you up. Now, we wear corsets all day when we're doing like a living history, and I'll tell you, when you're sitting all day, it is really good for your back.
I've had 2 back surgeries, I know.
Yeah. And if I'm sewing, and I'm sewing a dress, I'm wearing my corset because I'm trying things on and off. And it's really more comfortable sitting there at my machine with a corset on. So is it good to take it off when we get home? Yes. But the whole 18-inch waist, story with ribs removed, no, don't believe that. Did they have narrower waist? Yeah, they were a lot skinnier than we are. But also, a lot of that came from the fact that when they originally looked at corsets, they looked at them being tied the whole way together in the back, which they were not. So that's kind of where the 18-inch waist is. And the more you wear your corset, the more your body fits to it. So is it uncomfortable? Actually, no. You hear people who don't wear them will often be like, oh, I don't know how you do it. It's not that bad. And you know what? It's the fashion. Yes.
You said ties in the back.
It hooks in the front.
How do you get it tied in the back?
You have somebody tie
Well,
Oh, there's always a
if you
helper.
live-
I tied my own today.
If you're by yourself, you
need
get
a
your
mirror.
thumbs in there,
Yeah.
and you just start pulling it, and you pull your strings and you tie them.
Oh.
Then you go back again and you tighten it more, and then you tighten it up here.
But the ladies of the Patriot Daughters were the upper crust of Lancaster society.
They had people to help them.
Like they did when they were in Gettysburg.
And my wife still
And they
has
would have
people
helped
to
each
help.
other.
My nephew usually has to fix mine.
They would have helped each other too, yes.
So what was the main purpose of it? Just to make you look slimmer
To
or
make
to help your
you,
posture?
to have your style. At this point in time, the style is to look bell-shaped. Now, this is the early 1860s were bell-shaped. By the end of the 1860s, you've started to go into a bustle. In the 1870s, you're now into a bustle. So 1840s, there was no bell shape. They were wearing the empress waist. So they did have fashion magazines that came from France. Godey's magazine came from France, and did they study those magazines? Oh yes, just like we, want to be in fashion. So this was the style, and corsets were worn for many years after the Civil War. A long time before people started wearing bras, corsets were worn. I remember my grandmother wearing a corset.
I know in the 1920s and 30s, women were still wearing corsets.
The
So-
downside of a corset is after you've worn it for a very, very long time in your life, your spine gets weak and you tend to,
And your stomach
when you
muscles
take
and
it
your
off,
back
stand
muscles.
leaning over.
So they were more comfortable actually wearing the corset because of their, it helping their muscles and everything. Plus, too, they have stays in them and that's what makes them stiff. If you had a working corset, you may take some of those stays out. So, in order to bend over better. But once you have your corset on, you're gonna wear an under petticoat. So, this is an under petticoat. Now, you're walking around and you have your covered crinoline on and your skirt's sticking out, and you're walking down the street and you trip over the sidewalk and you fall and your dress goes up over your head. You have on your under petticoat that's underneath your covered crinoline, so that when you're wearing your split drawers, you are not showing everything to everybody. So that's the purpose of an under petticoat. Over that, you're going to wear either a covered crinoline or a caged crinoline.
Men should avert their eyes.
Yes, they should avert their eyes.
Here's my
This is
under petticoat.
This is a caged crinoline, and this is a covered crinoline. Now, this too was a rather new article of clothing. Before this, to get your bell shape, you might have worn 7 or 8 petticoats. So this is much easier and also much cooler in the summer. You know, you sit down, you can pull up a little bit, you know. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is show off those ankles. So, gentlemen, I'm going to show you my socks. And gentlemen should not be looking. But striped socks were the thing. You wanted striped socks because you wanted your ankles to look fat. In case a man saw your ankle, you wanted fat ankles. So, you know.
The slip that I have on is a 4-tiered. The one that I normally wear is a 6-tiered, which gives you a bigger bell shape.
So
But if you were working with soldiers and stuff, you would have either worn what she has on or the smaller hoop.
So over top of that, now we're ready to get dressed. We got all our underpinnings. And what did you notice about all those underpinnings? They were all white. Because that's what you're going to wash. You can wash it, you can lay it out in the sun to bleach. The other thing we're going to add is white collars. We could add white cuffs. We'll talk about undersleeves in a minute. So the next thing I'm going to do, so I've gotten up in the morning, I've got all my underpinnings on. Now I'm going to make breakfast. So what I'm going to put on is what Amy has on. She has on what's called a wrapper. Looks like a robe. Basically, that's what it is. So you would wear your wrapper. You know, you would never leave your house in that, nor would any company see you in that. But that's what you would wear. And wrappers tended to be kind of a wilder material. Now, we tend to think about dresses being black, white, gray. They loved colors, and they put some of the wildest colors together you've ever seen. So that would be a good wrapper right there because of the wild colors with it. So then what I'm wearing is what probably the Patriot daughters wore when they were in Gettysburg. This is called a wash dress. It's one of my older dresses, one of my nice dresses that I wore, a day dress, starting to wear out. I'm going to wear it as a wash dress. I'm obviously not wearing a covered crinoline. I would have worn a corded petticoat underneath it. I would wear what's called a pinner apron because it's pinned up here. Also the word pinafore, which little girls wore because it was pinned. So this would have been my wash dress. I didn't have a lot of dresses. I had a wash dress. I had probably a day dress. Depending on how much money I had, I might have had more than one day dress. And maybe a ball gown, if I had the money to go to a ball. So we're going to talk about day dresses. Both Colleen and Jeannie are wearing what's called a day dress. This is what you would have put on if you were receiving company at your house. If you were going out anywhere, you would have worn a day dress. You would never have been seen with people wearing a wash dress. You would not have ever worn this into town. You wouldn't have accepted company if you had on a wash dress. You would be wearing your day dress. Your day dress would have had a collar on it. You might have had cuffs. If you had a sleeve, like Amy, that wrapper has what's called a pagoda sleeve. And actually, I still have it. It goes on my mannequin at home. Actually, I still have the sleeve in there. If you have a pagoda sleeve like that, or what's called a coat sleeve, you would wear an undersleeve underneath it, which is a white sleeve that comes about up to here, because that's what can be washed. Your cuffs can be washed, your collar can be washed. So you're gonna wear that so that you can then wash that. It was rare to wash a day dress. If you did, you took it apart and you may have changed a little bit to catch up with what the fashion was. So Jeannie has on a Sontag, which is what you would have worn when it started to get cold. And I'll tell you, they really keep you warm.
Very warm.
They're made out of wool, so it really keeps you very warm. It's like a sweater vest. You would have always worn a brooch of some kind, earrings. Now, I purposely did this. I have silver earrings and a gold brooch. And everybody's going, oh, we're not supposed to put silver and gold together, right? Back then they didn't care. Because you might have only had one brooch. You might have only had one set of earrings. So you wore what you had, but they weren't as concerned about making sure that we're wearing all gold or all silver, which really annoys me when I wear this because it should match. But hair was always put up, parted in the middle. And if you look at pictures of babies, and you see little boys wore dresses until they were basically toilet trained, and you look at pictures and you go, I don't know if that's a boy or a girl. Well, look at their hair. Girls' hair is parted in the middle, boys' is parted on the side. That's how you can tell them apart. But women's hair would have been parted in the middle, it would have been pulled back. We probably would have worn some kind of head covering. Jeannie has on a lace one. The rest of us have on like a net with a ribbon on it. Different type of head coverings. Then we also would have, now these dresses, everything here is made out of cotton. Back then, probably would have been made out of wool or silk. Wool and silk was cheaper than cotton. There were a lot of silk factories in New England, so nowadays we do cotton more because silk is expensive. And like Jeannie has a silk dress which she was going to wear tonight, but if they were calling for rain, we'd never wear a silk dress if they're calling for rain, you know, or silk bonnets if they're calling for rain. So we're very careful. They said about earrings. So then, if it is cold outside, well, let's say let's do this. We're going to town. So if we are going to town, you're going to wear a bonnet, and you're also going to wear gloves.
And this would have been for like entertaining at home.
Yes.
With all this lace on the back. So I wouldn't have it on my head, but I would wear, oh, I just realized this is all pinned together, but there, gives you the idea.
You
what
would
it
wear
looks
a bonnet. And I also have a sunbonnet
Should
laying
we
over
show
there,
them?
which is what I would have
like.
worn.
This is
See, I
like
would
for
have worn a
working in the barn.
sunbonnet to work outside.
For those.
And then Colleen also has a bonnet with her. Bonnets were different shapes. And let me tell you, there was no tulle. Sometimes you see ladies with tulle. Tulle had not yet been invented. So if you see a reenactor with tulle, she's wrong. Wintertime, you would have worn a jacket, you could have worn a cape, you would have worn a shawl. We had muffs back then, and also some, there's a winter bonnet there too that I have. But winter bonnets, muffs, and you know, a cape, you wear a Sontag and a cape or a shawl and your muff, your winter hat, you can stay pretty warm. So, I don't think there's anything, I forget anything, and it's not real fur, so don't worry.
I didn't bring mine, but I have a long wool cloak that goes down pretty far down my dress. It's heavier than I'll get out, but it
Yeah.
does have a hood on it, so I can pull that up if I need to, like at Remembrance Day if it's really, really cold.
Does anybody have any questions about, yes?
So would they have, different petticoats for the winter time, maybe made out
Yes,
of
they
different
could have worn
material?
flannel,
Mhm.
like I have a red flannel petticoat. They also had quilted petticoats, and some of the quilting on it was very intricate. So yeah, they would have worn they would have worn flannel drawers too.
Yeah.
So, which I also have a pair of red flannel drawers. Not that y'all need to know that, but.
What she hasn't told you is, that she is with an artillery unit, so sometimes she's a Patriot daughter and sometimes she's a soldier.
I'm a captain in the U.S. Artillery Reserve. And yes, I fire cannons. I'm an anomaly. Any other questions? Yes.
How did they stay cool in the summer?
Well, you know, they were not used to air conditioning. We are used to air conditioning. And so their bodies got used to it. I mean, I find when I go to Gettysburg, last year Gettysburg was 100 every day, and it was really hot, and I was in a war uniform. But you kind of, over time, your body got a little more used to it. And I start drinking water 2 weeks before I go to Gettysburg. I stop using my air conditioner before I go to Gettysburg. So I'm starting to get used to that. You know, we come out of our air-conditioned house into our air-conditioned car, into our air-conditioned job. They didn't do that. They also, afternoons when it was hot, they're not going to be outside working. You know, they're going to, or if they are, they're in the shade. They open their windows. I don't know, people my age, we didn't have air conditioning when I was little. You know, and we survived the heat because we got used to it. I don't know if you ever notice as you go along in the summer, you're not minding the heat as much as you do. You know, like I was just in Williamsburg and it was 80. I was dying. You know, if I'm down there in August, it's not bothering me as much because now my body's getting used to it. So, you know.
They did have some
there
lighter
is-
weight fabrics.
They
too,
did.
that
Just gonna
used.
mention,
They wore sheer dresses too. They had a very lightweight sheer dress. But cotton, everything we're wearing is natural fiber. So they wore linen, which is flax. They wore wool. They wore cotton. Actually, a lightweight wool is very cool. So me dressed like this or like this in the summer is much cooler than somebody standing there in a polyester top. Because you're not breathing. I am breathing, my clothes are breathing and wicking away the sweat, but the polyester is not.
And the style of sleeves, some of those sheer dresses that we mentioned, they would have a loose pagoda sleeve without a cuff. So you're getting some more air in there, but they still have all the undergarments.
The other thing a lot of people ask is, are we hot down here? No, because when I walk, my slip swings and creates air. Where we're hot is where we've got 7 layers with a corset squeezed against us.
We had a fan, you know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they also adjust their tasks so they might work in the garden in the morning,
Yeah.
and then in the afternoon, they would be inside doing their work or their stuff?
I mean, if you notice, lots of times, you know, the Amish are working in their gardens early in the morning. Other people are working in their gardens early in the morning when it's cool. So you adjust your task to that, you opened your windows, you had cross ventilation, you know, you adapted to it. But, yeah, are we hot? Man, if it's 90 degrees out, everybody's hot, you know. So, there's a really cool meme that goes out, I put it out every year, where it's Melanie from Gone with the Wind, and the first day you're doing a reenactment, and somebody says, "Are you hot?" And Melanie sweetly says, "Oh, but my clothing is all cotton, and so I'm not." You know, and the second day it shows Scarlett with her little look, just looking at you like, "Are you kidding? Yeah, I am hot." Any other questions? Yes.
Did you have to take your food along to Gettysburg and your company, you slept there in the hospital?
In the hospital, our food all came from Lancaster County. We've continuously had wagon loads of food coming from Lancaster
We
County.
took 11 wagon loads up there when we first went.
And also the farms in the area all started donating things. The ladies stayed in that apartment across the street, which somebody graciously donated for them to stay there.
That's the one behind Gettysburg.
The one behind the Gettysburg.
Really good
The building is still there.
How many total women were there?
You mean from the Patriot Daughters? The
5
first time were 5, the second time was 3. Wow. If you go to the Seminary Ridge Museum, you'll see they talk about the Patriot Daughters.
And
And
we have a,
they have our book there.
Yeah, the original copy of the book, the paper copy, is up at the Adams County Historical Society.
And you can get this one free online. I mean, you read it
It won't
online.
look,
It
it
doesn't
won't
look
be.
Yeah, if you buy it that
bad,
way, it's on
but you can
Amazon.
read it.
You can read it online.
Any other questions? Yes,
One more.
sure.
So when did it kind of, change the style, that it wasn't so much a dress versus a skirt and a top?
Well, actually, it was, skirt and tops are more younger girls. Women our age did not wear skirts and tops. And actually, if you did, it meant you were poor, that you didn't have the money to have matching clothes.
Now, I do have two outfits that are skirts and blouses, but the blouse and the skirt are made out of the same fabric, so when I have
Yes.
it on,
You-
everybody thinks I have a dress on.
Right, you can do it if the fabric matches, but not if you're wearing a white blouse and that would be, you know, a teenage girl
Up to
might
20.
wear that.
They wore that.
But, you know, that was kind of a sign, and nobody wanted to. And you know, sewing machine was invented by now. Singer had already invented the sewing machine. He was selling it on credit, which is where credit started. So women would go together, like the Patriot daughters might have gone together and bought a sewing machine. They all probably had their own money to buy a sewing machine, but, you know, families might go together and buy a sewing machine. You could buy, and women would buy a bolt of material and make dresses, and they might all have the same dress, all the different styles, so. And dresses were being made and sold in stores too, so, you know. Any other questions?
There's a lot of enemy group, you care about men's fashions? Nobody does, right?
Unfortunately, our gentleman didn't dress tonight because he's
Yeah.
to work late.
But they always would have had, you didn't walk around in your vest. You wore a jacket. If you went out of your house, you had a jacket on.
Now, as a military
We
person,
can.
I could
Or
go
just leave
in
them
as
there,
long
let
as
people
my
pick 'em
top,
up.
it's the same with the vest, but as long as the top button is done, in casual wear, I'm okay. I'm considered to be okay now, you know, in casual wear, not to have all these buttons done up, just the top one.
So that is wool?
Hmm?
That is wool?
Well, this is wool and wool, I mean,
Yeah.
some of them were wool lined and wool. This one has a cotton lining, which was sort of typical for this kind of jacket. So, I mean, this is a dress coat or a officer's frock coat. Men usually like, even though these were issued, if you were an enlisted man, you kind of like the frock or the what they called a field jacket or something. And it's just a baggy work coat, and that's what they like. Some of those were lined, some of them weren't. But they're great. I mean, they wick away. Breeze kind of goes through them. It's not as bad when you're out on a hot day as you might think. This one's going to be miserable, but the fatigue jackets aren't so bad. But I remember we had all the fife and drum corps with us, and we used to run fife and drum corps, and we were taking where the New York regiments came through behind Seminary Ridge, there where the Pennsylvania Monument now is, to fill the hole that Dan Sickles left when he wasn't following orders. My ancestor was with him and wounded, but anyway, that was another story. But, so we're there, and the park personnel were given this tour, and the young scouts that are field music were coming through with us, and also a bunch of visitors. And the one lady comes up to me, a young lady, says, "Oh, aren't you guys too hot in all that wool to do this?" And she was wearing shorts and sneakers, and we're going through briars and ticks and all that stuff, and poison ivy. And I said, really, the only thing worse than the way we're dressed is the way you're dressed. Because we can go through anything like this. And I used to tell the kids that were playing with me, when I was at Octorara School down here, I was in the band, we wore polyester uniforms. Nobody complains about wool, but had to go.
Well, that was just wonderful, ladies.
Well, thank you for having us.
Oh, yeah. There are brochures and things out over here and talk to the ladies individually
Yeah,
if
if
you
you have any
want to.
questions.
We also have refreshments out in the hallway. And,
Okay.